many times you see somebody just wants a quote, and obviously the best people say, no, we have to make sure we understand where you're at, what's going on, what are your needs, why would you want it? And
you want a quote, you're cannon fodder. That means they're already buying from somebody else.
Absolutely. And then
nobody ever just calls up and says, I want a quote because I just want to buy. No, that doesn't happen.
Absolutely. So Steve Fitz, another great tech CRO, says, well said, Steve. John McMahon. You guys probably overlap Sumo Logic, is my guess, right?
Yes.
Discovery, slow down to speed up, which is what you just were talking about. There are no shortcuts to the outcome. Take the time to understand and follow the process, which equals intended outcomes. So
yeah, there you go. Just Steve said it too. And just like I was saying, deal advancement or intended outcomes. If you're not really measuring that and measuring accomplishment, then you're just looking at activity and you're kidding yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And here from Ben, I don't know if it's Knaus or Naus, for a young seller in startup world, hungry for the opportunity to shape a company's go-to-market, but knowing they need to build foundational skills. What's more important? Working for a proven sales leader, maybe a bigger company, or working at a vetted.
Well, I get the gist. Really, at the end of the day, I always tell young people
more responsibility. So it's kind of learning on the job. Maybe like some early sellers at a PTC, or kind of doing your HP route.
Look, I tell all young people, go to a place where they're going to train the shit out of you. Train you, and you're working for a manager that's going to help mentor you. And maybe you have to go there for a little less money, but you're going to get trained, and that it's going to help you on your next step of your career, and then the money will follow. But if you're going only for the money or only for the title, and you're not going to learn anything, and you don't know why the job you're taking now and what it's going to lead to in your next job, in your career progression, I think you're just kidding yourself. So all young salespeople need to go to work to a company that's going to train the hell out of you, big or small. And then you're going to work for a manager that really knows how to sell, knows how to qualify, knows how to recruit top-notch people, because you also don't want to be the best on the team. You don't want to be an A player that's looking around and there's a bunch of C's on the team.
Right.
Then you'll be unhappy. You want to be where you look to your left and look to your right and go, oh my gosh, these are all A players. I got to pick my game up. And I can not only learn from my manager, I can learn from these other reps and listen to what they do and their best practices.
Yep, absolutely. So, speaking about younger sales, any advice for people that want to break into tech sales?
I mean, a lot of times you might have to you're probably not going to go into a raw startup if you're going to try to break into tech sales, because maybe that's just the wrong place for you. You may not even understand half the terminology or acronyms that are being thrown around at you. And so it'd probably be best to go to a bigger company first, like an Oracle, an EMC Dell. Some of those, maybe a Salesforce.com that's known for really training their employees. Spend a couple of years there, learn the ropes, and then you can go jump into a startup.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you also have to be careful jumping into a startup. Even if you're a really well-experienced salesperson, you got a lot of these startups are very, very risky, and you got to understand, whether or not the team and the product and the market is ready for you to jump in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of times too, I see people go from big companies to smaller companies, and they don't realize how good they had it in terms of all the support and the help. And then all of a sudden, all the customers that they thought they had relationships with, they had the relationships because they had the Oracle, the HP, the Cisco, the Salesforce kind of name on their business card. And all of a sudden,
right. So if I call up and I say, I'm John McMahon with Cisco, one, they already have a budget for Cisco. Two, they know my name or the name of the company. Three, they know what I sell, right? So it's like, come on in, and there's one or two people that are, have the budget and are going to be friendly to the Cisco person. Now call up and say, I'm John McMahon with Blade Logic. Dude, we already have Blade servers. I don't sell Blade servers. I sell software. And I never heard of your company. So I just picked up the phone and I'm cold calling. I'm on my heels. And in 30 seconds, I got to be able to convince this person just to give me 5 minutes of his time just to listen to how Blade Logic might be able to help their company, right? So you're already on your heels. Then you get inside the company, and now you don't know how to navigate your way through that company to find a true champion. Versus you go to these bigger companies, and like you said, they already have the business card. There's already a budget. There's already a champion. And a lot of this stuff is already set for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jesse here just posted, Randy is going to be on Whiskey Wednesday tonight. And Jesse, just to make sure.
Wednesdays. I didn't know that about you, Randy.
There you go. So Jesse, if you want, feel free to throw the link up there, but I think it's tomorrow night at 9 p.m. East. So we can use this to communicate to make sure if I have it right or wrong, but need to get that straightened out for sure. And John Festeo says, nice to meet you, John. So Jonathan, feel free to ask
meet you, Jonathan.
questions. What about any advice for those impacted in recent layoffs?
I think same thing. Just go figure out like where you are, what stage you are in your career. Don't just take a job to take a job. I mean, you might have to pay some bills, but it doesn't hurt to be pretty smart about, what companies you're going to try to target that still are hiring. Because even though there's a lot of companies that are doing really poor in this environment, there still are companies that are doubling in size. And again, figure out, are they going to train me? Am I going to go to work for a manager that knows how to sell, how to qualify so that I can learn from them? If you're further on in your career, maybe you can afford to take another risk at a startup, but be smart because you can figure out pretty quickly which companies are still hiring and which ones aren't.
Yeah. Something I like to suggest too to folks is I think a lot of times tech companies now are kind of, I'll say, lame in terms of performance management and coaching and giving feedback. So they use kind of layoffs as a lazy way to do performance management. So
exactly.
Don't necessarily get in a fight, but go back to kind of whoever it is that you work for or worked with that you trust and just say, look, unrelated to HR, legal, anything else, please just give me any constructive feedback. What can I do different or better to improve? And that helps them be a lot more self-aware and helps them be better for the next job because a lot of times that performance management process is just sloppy.
Yeah, that's why you see Google and Amazon and Facebook all laying off 10,000 and now they're announcing another 10,000. It's really not a layoff. It's performance management. They're getting rid of they overhired and they're getting rid of the people that are really not contributing to the company. There's going to be a lot more of that.
Yeah, it's crazy. So Jesse put the link in there. So thanks, Jesse. And then Brian comes back and says, sorry, Randy, my question for John, how do you see software sales changing moving forward? You have so many millennials that grew up digital first that are becoming decision makers. They aren't in an office. You can't just drop in and give them cupcakes or see them in person.
Yeah.
How do sellers adjust to digital first remote decision makers?
Yeah, I think that's a tough one because, one of my biggest skills for me personally was to be able to go into a room when there were 10 people sitting in the room,
right,
and walk around the room, shake hands, look in everybody's eye and start to immediately assess, could this person be the champion? Could they be a coach? They don't really care. This person could be the economic buyer. This person's just here because somebody's told them to show up. This person could be the tech user. This person's just a gatekeeper. So I started to assess that right away. And then what I do is based upon the meeting, I listen really intently to every question that they asked or how they said something and how everybody in the room responded. So it started to tell me a lot about the people in the room and who I wanted to follow up one-on-one. So now I think you can still do that. It's just that you're doing a lot more Zoom calls, a lot more, remote calls as Brian was talking about. So it's a lot more difficult. But in some cases, what you really learn about people is they act one way when they're in a conference room with, 10 other people of their teammates, and they act completely different and give you a lot more information about what's really going on when it's one-on-one. So I think you just have to go one-on-one with as many people as you can and ask the same questions to everyone. And when you ask the same questions to everyone, you're probably able to piece together the pie better than maybe that one person is because you've asked the same question to all their counterparts also. So does it make it tougher? Yeah, it would have been much tougher for me for sure.
Yeah.
but it's still doable. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'd also say take the opportunity. So, for example, during COVID, Chris Riley did a fantastic job. He'd say, hey, the people I know well, I'm going to go meet up for, coffee or drink or lunch or dinner, whatever. But if I don't know them, I'm going to reach out because people just starve for that face-to-face time. So I think a lot of times these millennials, if it's okay to say age-wise, kind of hide and use it as an excuse, as opposed to the way we grew up is you do the face-to-face. So I think today's day and age, people are still, starve for that face-to-face contact. So, go ahead and push for that face-to-face, and you can probably box out the competitors because you're building that relationship, which is either.
And I think you'll find sometimes you can just say to people like, could you coach me? Like, I'm trying to sell to your company. Right. I don't really know the landscape. I don't know who really makes the decision. Is there any way you can just coach me a little? And some people may say no. And some people may say, yeah, sure. I'd love to coach you,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I see the question on, what is it on moving from SaaS to consumption?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's really interesting. What I think is going to happen, and I see it happening in a lot of companies now, and and some companies are doing it and they're jumping ahead of it, and a lot of companies aren't, is one, the really good companies are building telemetry or instrumentation into their software, so they know every single move that the customer is making with the software. So so they model like what the ideal ramp time might be for a customer using the product in specific use cases. And then what they'll do is they'll see a customer coming on board, but they kind of go in a little sideways, and they know what features and functions the customer's using. So now it sends a trigger to client success, and client success calls and says, hey, looks like you might be having trouble doing something like this. Did you know we have a capability XYZ that'll allow you to, do something a lot different? So that's number one. Number two, client success is going to become more and more paramount to the success of sales. And the two organizations have to work really closely together. So I'm seeing more. And so let's go back in history. Really, customer support was always what they would call break fix, meaning you literally waited till the customer had something broken in the software, and then you'd have your support team go ahead and fix it. Nowadays, you basically have to have what I would call a concierge service. You have to know basically what every customer does, like Monday through Friday, and you have to be like a good concierge, almost right in step with them. And if you're not, your organization is going to be left behind and your consumption is going to go down. Because when we were selling perpetual software, for people that are young here, that meant that they bought your software, they owned it for life. So as a company, if they bought everything they could possibly buy, you had a long time to fix the problems, and that was break fix. Then you move to subscription, annual subscriptions, and now you basically have a little less than a year to fix the customer's problem before the renewal. Otherwise, boom, there goes the renewal, up goes churn, right? So now with consumption, dude, you got a week, you got a couple days maybe. If they're trying out your software and it's not working, they can turn it off like a light switch and go to another company. So client success is becoming more and more paramount. It's going to keep becoming more and more paramount. And because the nature of the mindset in client success has to change, I'm seeing more and more of the companies that I'm working with that are taking a VP of sales, like maybe the VP of Northern Europe, right? And taking that person and putting them in charge of client success. Why? Because the people you need to have that mentality of a concierge service. So they have a sales background in addition to hiring people like SEs that have a technical background, but are kind of salesy. And they're able to not only help the customer implement the software correctly for their use case, but they're also able to kind of upsell that customer and cross-sell that customer into other products. So that's where I think it's going to change. And organizations also have to know, every single day, every single moment, how much that customer is consuming, because, you're going to have to forecast revenues. You're not forecasting bookings, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then great answer. That ties into one from Shannon here. So best practices on qualifying renewals. So when you do want to kind of supersize and upsell those customers, assuming who knows where they're on that ramp, anything you'd focus on more than you would in a pre-sales conversation?
Is that, I don't know if I really understand it as well. I think I basically answered that in the last one, where I think you have to basically have you sold to this customer, and now you as a salesperson and your client success people have to have this concierge mentality. And your company, whatever software they sell, needs to build instrumentation or telemetry into your software to make sure that you know every step, and every function that they're using in that software, so you can find out very quickly whether or not that customer is going sideways. And you can maybe send them a message, hey, did you know we have a online training program on how to build a model in the software? Or did you know that we have this capability? Or just, you can call them. So there's so many proactive things you can do. But if you haven't built instrumentation and telemetry into the software, then you're kind of blind as a salesperson, and you're kind of blind as a client success person, because all you can do is call and say, hey, how's it going? Or you're sitting there and you're reactive and waiting until they tell you they have a problem. And a lot of times when companies have problems, they wait until it's too late to tell you they have problems, and those problems fester. Right. No one from your company has been calling them. The sales rep and the client success people haven't been calling them. So what do they naturally do? They call the competition. And the competition's already in there. And then when you find out you lost it, it's way too late. So you have to be as proactive as you possibly can. Hopefully that answers Shannon's question.
But if you think about it, it's, you're not just qualifying that first deal, every year, or really throughout the year. You're kind of I call it an ongoing med pick process. So you want to figure out, kind of pull out, is the problem? How are they satisfied? What's the criteria? Decision makers could change. So I would argue use the same.
More and more salespeople are going to be they're going to be kind of comped a little bit on bookings, but mainly on revenue. So, okay, so you sold a deal, but now how much is the customer consuming? Because the CEO is only going to be reporting on revenues, right? So they're going to push the organizations more and more on. You can't sell this deal and leave. You got to sell this deal and get the customer to consume.
Yeah, improving the NRR. And so, Patrick, I didn't give you the shout out. Thanks for that. And from Jonathan, we have he has a cool company, SalesBricks, which is in the CPQ space. Is seeing a lot of success selling on a consumption basis versus an all upfront subscription fee model. This helps the quick win to close a logo, but long term to earn the billing / revenue.
Yeah, they're probably doing PLG, like product led growth, right? So they're kind of doing what I said, but they're doing that up front. Sorry. So what they're doing is there's some sort of free trial. They probably have built instrumentation into the free trial. They know everything that customer is doing. They're monitoring that POC, basically a built-in online POC, and they're able to close that customer and then get the customer to consume more, once they buy. So you're going to see more and more PLG models too, where customers can go into what you might call a free tier. And then once they're in the free tier, then they move into the paid tier.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark Roberge probably considered the godfather of PLG there for sure.
Mark's really smart, very smart guy.
Amazing. So a couple of other questions I want to put in here. So, we had sales ops back in the day, it would be kind of more looking in the rearview mirror. Now, kind of the whole RevOps function with all these tools and tech stack that's out there. I mean, that's really amazing, almost like cheating.
Yeah. Do you have a question there?
No, I didn't know if you had an opinion on what would you see with the just the tools and the reporting out to be able to kind of help.
I don't know. Sometimes I think there's so many freaking tools out there. Like you can kind of get lost in the tools and not really go back to the basics of like how to sell. Like we were talking about earlier. So as a manager, you can get lost in all the activities and all the metrics and all of that stuff, but are you truly helping your salespeople learn how to really sell? Are you teaching them the knowledge they need and going back and help coaching on the skills? Because knowledge, like if somebody's really smart, I can give them knowledge really quickly, right? But skills take a long time to develop. If I want to become a great golfer, a great dartboard thrower, great bowler, I don't care what it is, great ping pong player, it's going to take thousands and thousands of repetitions. So, you got to be patient with the people that work for you, and you got to help them, develop the skills that they need to execute the plays. And the best way that I found to do that is really, watching somebody really good do it. And then from there, a lot of role playing and let them fail. It's okay to fail. And when you're coaching them, it's like a golf coach. If I just started playing golf like 3 years ago. So if the golf coach, if I took a lesson and they were telling me like 10 things to do every time I swung, and they'd say, dude, I just told you these 10 things and you're not doing any of them, I'd start to think, well, this golf is just really not for me. If this is the coach and they think that that's really what you're supposed to do after a couple lessons, well, this is the wrong game for me. Now, if I have the right coach and they say, hey, John, all I want you to do is grip the club the right way, take a number of swings and hit the ball. And they wait until I get that in my DNA. And they say, okay, now, John, when you take the club back, I want you to keep your left arm straight. That's all I want you to do. Okay, hit the ball. Wait till I get that in my DNA. And now we move on. And a lot of times I think, managers just impatient with the young salespeople that you have working for you. And you have to understand that everybody doesn't have the same skill set and everyone's different. If you treat all your people cookie cutter and you think that they're supposed to have the same knowledge and skills as you're just a really bad manager. Everybody's completely different. They have different fears, insecurities, doubts, strengths, weaknesses, skills, knowledge. And it's your job to get intimate with them and understand those things so that you can really help coach them. And if you're not willing to do that, get out of sales leadership. Go sell something.
Absolutely. So speaking of that, in terms of great CROs these days and coaches and performers, any folks in particular you would shout out to?
I mean, there's so many. I mean, there's Kelly Connery, there's Mark Roberge, there's Adam Aarons, there's Steve Fitz who's on, there's Chris Degnan, there's, so many different people. I can just go on and on and on. There's so many talented people out there.
For sure. And obviously came from your sales tree there. So from Roberto, probably the last question here, shout out to McMahon. Your book is quickly becoming the sales manager Bible, how to see being the Bible, period. So back in our consumption model points here, he says, how do you see the consumption model changing and the sales teams having to now spend more time finding additional use cases that will drive more consumption and additional commitments? So back in the old days, you'd have different business units. Could be kind of on the product side, other uses, and this is probably just a version of that.
Yeah, I think it just depends upon the product that you sell. So it's kind of a difficult question to answer. It's basically, can your product go into different use cases? If it can go into different use cases in the same organization, then you have to find those personas that own those use cases and sell to them. If not, then you have to go find other organizations.
Absolutely. So, all right. Well, you've been awesome. Really, really appreciate it. Time flies when you're having fun. Jonathan gives a shout out as well for Adam and Mark. So for those that
it's backwards. The book's backwards. You have to.
Oh, geez. All right. Sorry. Anyway, so the qualified sales leader. Sorry about that. But it's really a great, easy read, but just so much common sense and things that we did, I think kind of in our sleep back in the day, but have really kind of gotten lost here somehow with over time. But John, you've been fantastic. Thank you so much. Tucker reposts this everywhere. So anybody wants to suggest any others to check it out, feel free. Convertive, thanks for your sponsorship. And next week we have Dan Zugelder from VMware on for Tech Sales Insights. So everybody have a great rest of the day. And John, thank you so much.